All right, Alex, so it's 2 o'clock and it looks like we do have some attendees in the room. If you want to get started by just introducing yourself.
Sure, not a problem. Let me just get control of my mouse over here. So I am Alexander Paykin. If you weren't looking to hear me speak, I don't know why you're here. So I run a law firm. I'm the chair of the Committee on Technology and Legal Profession for the New York State Bar, and I'm on all these other committees and do all sorts of technological things. You get the gist. I do want to throw out a disclaimer. Remind you that this is for informational purposes only, not legal advice, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the usual ones. Bullet point 4 is the one that primarily applies to this presentation, which is that I will be referencing names of vendors just because it's easier to reference a lot of products by brand than it is by product. That does not mean they're the only ones out there that do a particular service or that I necessarily endorse them or that you should be using them unless I specifically say otherwise. Otherwise is going to include you should absolutely and totally be using Microsoft Word. That's basically one of the few where you don't really get a choice in the industry. But we'll discuss all that in a few minutes. So what's today's presentation about? Well, common technology, the stuff that you should really know about, be able to use, and by use I mean professionally, not as a consumer, in order to practice law. So all of you have smartphones at this point. Most of you are going to have laptops or tablets or desktops. I imagine at least one of those three, probably two, possibly three. Most of you have them connected to all sorts of social media. Most of you are not using secure passwords. You're reusing your passwords. That's all bad enough for purposes of identity theft and having your bank account stolen. It becomes even worse when your license is on the line. So we're going to talk about the tech that you're storing your client data on, that you're storing your firm data on, and the kind of software and technology you're going to be using that interacts with that data. So this is where you need to use technology like a professional. Many of these tips should also be applied to your everyday life. I should mention, by the way, I'm keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A. So if anybody along the way has any question about anything I say, a follow-up, further details, etc., don't hesitate. I will be doing my best to answer those as I go to the extent they stay within the same topic. But if I can't and we're running tight on time, I will make sure to respond to you afterwards. You can also email me. I will provide that information on the last slide. So let's start with mobile devices. Cell phones and tablets are easier in terms of the technology associated with them and the security associated with them, just because they're essentially a single piece system that as long as you keep to some basic rules, you can keep yourself fairly safe. By default, it's very easy to turn on encryption. You should always make sure your device is encrypted. You should also never be using a shape for your unlock or any kind of unlock that's easy to get without your express interaction. PIN codes, and I don't suggest 4-digit ones, but rather long PIN codes or passwords are best. Shapes are terrible. Fingerprints are not that good. Depending on the line of work you're in, if you're crossing a border and a customs officer forces you to, you're going to put your fingerprint on there and there's nothing you can do about it. That sort of thing. So if for most of you, fingerprinting or facial recognition is going to be good enough, but again, you're going to want to ask yourself what field you're working in. So multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is extremely important for anything where you're going to have access to client data. So you should not be able to log into your email, let's say, from a new device without it going through MFA and sending, a 4-digit code to your cell phone that you then have to type in. You should not have any account that contains sensitive information allow logins from an unrecognized device without MFA. For recognized devices, it's still going to reset you from time to time, but realistically, the first thing that happens if your cell phone goes missing is you should be finding a device to brick it from. and you should have all of your remote wipe and remote lock enabled and configured. And you should always have a plan of how somebody on your behalf can shut the thing down the moment it disappears. You should disable lock screen notifications. You should always use a VPN when connecting via any network that is not safe and secure to you, meaning not your home, not your office. Like I say, there's no harm in using your VPN even in your home and office. It makes it a little bit more difficult if you have a home or office network and you want to communicate with other devices. And there are sites that won't work well with VPNs, so occasionally you have to turn them off, but only from a trusted network. When you're on a non-trusted network, shields up. So timely updates, have everything that you use set up to automatically update. When a pop-up asks you if you should update, the answer is yes, unless you're absolutely busy right now and it's going to really mess with your work, in which case go ahead and wait and update as soon as you're done. But don't let updates pile up for months on end. Some of them are security related and some of them are really important. Repairs. This is one you're probably not thinking about in terms of security, but if you drop your phone and you break your screen, if you walk it into the nearest You Break I Fix or whatever branded shop you go into, the first thing they're going to ask you for is your phone's PIN code. Why? Because as part of the work that they're doing, as required by Apple and Google, they have to plug the thing in before and after and run various analyses on it. And they allegedly can only do it in the back room where you're not allowed because there's proprietary equipment there. How much do I believe that story? I don't know, but that's what multiple shops have told me. So that sounds like the company line. Now, that's terrible, even if you're not a lawyer. I don't know about you, but I have banking information on there. I have my car keys on there. I have my home lighting controls on there. All sorts of things run through my phone. I'm not going to give somebody the code to it and leave it there for an hour or two and trust them. As a lawyer who has all sorts of client files accessible through my phone, I am doubly not going to do that. So unless you're good enough at repairing your phone to do it yourself, my advice to most lawyers is if you drop it and you break the screen, pick it up, put it on a cinder block and bash it with a hammer or another cinder block until it's powder. Then go buy a new phone and go ahead and restore from a nicely done backup, which of course you've been doing to the secure cloud folder that you obviously configured when you first set up your phone. And realistically, your phone shouldn't have all that much local data on it anyway. Really, it's just a matter of restoring your apps. Most apps keep their data in the cloud these days. If you lose your high score in Fallout Shelter, I'm terribly sorry for you. But beyond that, do not take your phone to a repair shop if it requires unlocking it. Now, the good news is I've written about this to Google and Apple, and I've written articles about this, and there have been announcements. Android is in the process of putting in repair mode, so is Apple. Apparently, you're going to be able to remotely set your device into repair mode, and then you bring it in and they don't need your PIN code anymore, and they can do just the repairy things. I'm not quite sure how well those features are going to work. If they do, awesome, but stay tuned for that. As of right now, if the repair shop asks for your PIN code, consider your phone irrevocably broken. Then we've got productivity apps that you should be aware of. There's the bullet point list of the things that you should know how to use. Know how to use means know how to use professionally, how to set up your email so that it has a good signature block, configuring away messages, configuring filters and auto forwards, et cetera, et cetera. You should be familiar with practice management system apps, although to be fair, now that there's so many different practice management systems, you generally wait till you're working somewhere and find out which practice management system they're using before you spend too much time acquainting yourself with that specific app. You should pick one. The most popular with small and medium-sized firms right now is Clio. Pick them, pick anybody, get a free trial from somebody for a couple of weeks, click around, look at all the features, get the idea of how they work, and then that should be enough for you to at least come in with the competence of understanding what it's there for, and then learning the specific interface you can do on the job. Messaging apps like WhatsApp, what I mean by knowing how to use them is remember that as an attorney, you have a duty to safeguard information. So disappearing messages are a no-no. Deleting communications with the client or opposing party or whoever is a no-no. Now, you might say, why on earth would I communicate with anybody via WhatsApp? Good question. In a perfect world, you're using the online portal built into your practice management system. And for non-secure communications, you're using email. Footnote, email is not secure. There is no such thing as encrypted email unless it takes you to an outside portal. If it's readable in your inbox, it is not secure. So you might use WhatsApp for the fact that it has end-to-end encryption, and most importantly, because your clients might love it. And if you work anything in international law, you will find that in other countries, apps like WhatsApp are king, and you're just not going to be able to get away from using them. Now, using them professionally means figuring out how to properly store all those chats. If there's the remote possibility of somebody deleting a message after they send it to you, of logging it contemporaneously. So when I say learn to use these apps, I don't mean learn how to send and receive a message. I mean go through all the settings and figure out how to configure them all so that you're using them within the parameters of your professional responsibilities. You should be able to review and edit Word files, PDFs, and spreadsheets on the go. Again, simple apps. I'm not saying you should be able to draft a memorandum of law on your phone. Most people don't want to do that, but you should be able to review a document really quick, check for whatever it is you're checking for on page 23, and continue with your day, all from your mobile device, if you want to be able to practice law on the go. You should know how a virtual PBX system or a Google Voice type product works, and you should have one configured on your phone. Essentially, it's a whole different phone number that is not your cell phone. It has its own app, which lets you do calling, text messages, whatever. And it's essentially your business line, or it's tied to your business phone system. That way, clients can communicate with you in what they perceive as your cell phone. Meanwhile, it's a separate app, and you can configure it not to disturb you outside of work hours or during certain private hours. And should you leave that job, you get to disconnect that app without having to ever have to tell clients on your personal cell phone that you don't work there anymore or whatever. So it's a way of separating work from personal. Very good idea to do that. You should also look at any number of productivity apps. They vary by Android versus Apple. That will be extremely helpful to you during any number of tasks. I'm going to try to mention a few at the end, but I think I've spent enough time on mobile and tablet that I should really move on to the next slide. Because the next slide's the really big one, desktops and laptops. So one, security. I'm only giving it a short bullet point there, but it's the first one. And yes, it's the most important one. If your laptop is lost or stolen, what happens to your client data? Is the hard drive actually encrypted? Will it auto-delete if somebody tries to log in incorrectly a few times? Do you have the ability to remotely wipe it in the event somebody powers it up and it connects to the internet? You get the idea. So encryption, antivirus, firewall, remote wipes, VPNs, all the security updates, and the same point when it comes to repairs. If I'm going to send away my laptop to Dell for a repair, I'm going to take out the data drive. And this is where we're gonna get to hard drives in a little bit. But I do want to point out that on any device where you get to manage how many drives you have, obviously not your cell phone or tablet for the most part, but on your laptop or desktop, you should have a separate hard drive where all the programs get installed, the C drive as Windows refers to it, and you should put in a separate second hard drive, completely different disk, not a separate partition for those of you who knows what that means. I mean by a separate chip that will be an SSD, a solid state drive, that you stick into the open port inside the computer, and that becomes your second drive or your data drive. That'll be drive D, as Windows will automatically call it, unless, of course, you already have a CD-ROM or a DVD drive. Sorry, CD-ROMs are way too old. In which case this will become drive E or whatever Windows decides to call it. It'll get a letter. Somebody will give it a letter. Apple won't. Apple will just call it a mount and make you name it. But not the point. The point is you put all of your data, your client data, whatever data you want on that drive, and it's separate from the operating system drive. Why? Because if that drive fails, you're restoring from backup. There's no point in sending your computer for repairs. However, if anything else about your computer fails, you take out that drive and then you mail the thing to Dell, fearing no issues. Obviously, once you wipe the cache and clear out the temporary files and make sure drive C is sterilized, and we can discuss that at length in a different program. But the point is you can send out your device without sharing your actual data. And as for that data drive, it should be encrypted so that if somebody does take it out of your computer and try to stick it into something else, it won't open. So a little jump ahead on hard drives there. So coming back to this slide though, Microsoft Word, I assume those of you following along have already gotten the point of there's a lot of features here. And most people, most lawyers, just about every law school graduate I've hired do not know how to use Microsoft Word professionally. Most lawyers I know with 20 years of experience don't know how to use Microsoft Word professionally. What I mean by professionally is configuring it to work for you and to do the sort of things that save your clients lots of money while not costing you a penny, in fact, increasing your billable hours a little bit, but to the client's benefit. What do I mean by that? If I prepare an appellate brief, I have the option to prepare the brief itself and send it off to the appellate printer, and they will charge an exorbitant fee for preparing the table of authorities and the table of contents and the cover page. Or I could learn how to do that myself and have it prepare automatically by properly configuring my styles so that I have headings and subheadings and the tables of contents populate themselves instantly with the click of a button, and by tagging all of my citations so that, again, if I click Insert Table of Authorities, all of my cases and all of my statutes appear instantly. Then I drop in a pre-built cover page, and voila, I've just made the entire appellate brief. And since there's no longer a printing requirement, since everything's electronically filed, well, I e-file it, saving my client $1,000 or $2,000. And did it add more work for me? Sure. While I was tagging things for citations, maybe 0.5 of an hour. So the client's going to pay 0.5 of an hour of my time versus a couple of grand for the appellate printer to do it. That's a no-brainer. So if you learn those sorts of things, you make yourself more useful to the client, you lower their costs, you improve your skills, and you impress the managing partner. Because if I ever managed to hire a recent law school graduate that brought me a document that properly had styles configured, that properly used cross-references, that had tables of contents and tables of authorities that were automatically generated and self-updating, I would be so shocked. They would be on my radar from day one, and I mean, there's no better way to get me to notice. A great way to get me to notice in a terrible way is to not do any of those things and bring me a document that looks like garbage when I open it up in Word. So anyway, Word is probably the most important tool that lawyers use. It is what you're going to be working in the entire, you live in three places basically: Microsoft Word, your emails, and Adobe Acrobat. And pepper that in with phone calls, text messages, and running off to court for often not particularly necessary reasons, and there's your day. So Microsoft Word is where you're going to produce most of your work product. That's really the product you should know like the back of your hand. If you feel like you know every function in every portion of the ribbon, in every tab and subtab, that is when you should stop learning Microsoft Word. There are great programs on Word for lawyers. There are consulting companies that specialize in teaching Word to lawyers. There's a great guy, Baron, I suddenly can't remember his last name. He's on the ABA Tech Show board. He teaches amazing Microsoft Word courses that last for 20 hours. Until you know Word as well as he does, you're an amateur. So do not think you know it well enough. You can always know it better. Excel, on the other hand, has way too many features for you to care about. You don't need to know 90% of what it does, but you should be able to do basics with it. Why? Because as lawyers, we get to work with data and dollars and numbers on a regular basis. If you've got a list of 5,000 names and you want to filter it for repeats, if you've got a whole bunch of dollar figures that you're trying to do adjustments on to create a settlement sheet, if you're doing any number of things, Excel is your friend if you learn the basic formulas. And really, if you take a 2-hour intro to Excel course, you should be covered on everything you need with Excel on a regular basis. Beyond that, if you suddenly realize, ooh, I wish I knew how to do this, a 2-minute YouTube video will get you the rest of the way. So do be mindful that from time to time you are going to have to deal with a spreadsheet. And from time to time, you're going to want to drop the data into a spreadsheet for ease of data analysis, calculations, data presentation, any number of things. But again, you don't need to go crazy knowing every feature, but you should know the gist of how they work. Adobe Acrobat is where basically everything you did in Word is going to get output to and get produced. Whether you're sending it to the client, opposing party, opposing counsel, the court, more likely than not, it's going out as a PDF. And even if it's not going out as a PDF copy of it is being saved in your firm's cloud storage, and then somebody is printing that PDF and mailing it out. That's the only other way it's going anywhere. So everything is Adobe Acrobat in the end. So you should really know how to use Adobe Acrobat for final production. Edits to pre-generated documents, filling in fields in pre-generated forms, bait stamping. You're going to want to know how to redact. You're going to want to make sure you know how to OCR for documents that come to you from the other side and you can't highlight the text because it's an image. You should know how to use the compare tool to compare two versions of a document. You should be able to highlight, comment, and you should also be able to sign the document and send it out for e-signature, whether through Adobe or through DocuSign or whoever. So that's the basics of desktop. Let's discuss what you do in your browser or on the cloud, because this is independent of your hardware. Here is what you're going essentially to the internet for. And I did not list one bullet on here that I actually want to start with, because it just dawned on me today that I totally forgot to add it to the presentation. Electronic filing and electronic data access. So by that, I mean the federal court systems, ECF and PACER, the New York state systems, which is NYSEF and eCourts, which also has an e-track system. And that also means administrative online systems. So for example, for property records, varies county by county. In New York City, not including Richmond County, we have ACRIS. Richmond County has its own system. Suffolk County had an online system, but then it got hacked. And in an overabundance of caution, they took it offline for what will probably be forever. But you should be aware of the systems that exist, how to use them, how to access the Department of Finance system and look at financial information about, let's say, real estate, if you intend to be a real estate attorney. If you intend to do commercial or corporate work, you should know how to go to the Department of State website and where to search for corporate names and how to apply for various documents through their portals. You should also learn the IRS system for applying for, let's say, tax ID numbers. So be mindful that there's lots of portals out there, and when you're hired and your boss tells you, go ahead and e-file that, or go ahead and get me the property tax information on this parcel, you want to be able to say, I know how to do that. So learn ahead of time the potential portals that you're going to need to use given your practice area. Now on to the more generic stuff. So I'm going to beat a dead horse and say passwords, multi-factor authentication, VPNs, encryption, malware scanners, blockers, pop-up and ad blockers, regular security updates. I think I covered that. Now, Microsoft Office 365 and/or Google Workspace. Now, obviously, for the productivity applications, Word, Excel, my preference is going to be for Microsoft Word for just its feature-rich functionality, and the fact that everybody else uses it, so you're going to want to use it for collaboration. That being said, I still use a Google Doc or a Google Sheet from time to time when I want something simple, and I happen to be in a Google managed email account. Whether you use Office 365, Workspace, or some other product, just make sure you're not using a free email when it comes to legal work. You do not communicate with your clients with an @gmail.com, @optonline.net, @Comcast, or God forbid, @AOL. Yes, there are lawyers who still do this. Most of them have not read the terms of service. In fact, I assume all of them have not read the terms of service. If you've got a free Gmail or similar email account, you do not have true ownership of your data. The way you know that is the moment you send an email out about that awesome barbecue you saw at Home Depot last week, and you're thinking about buying it, you suddenly get a bunch of ads on every website you visit trying to sell you that barbecue. Now, you want a paid email where your data is secure and not shared, because that means that their systems aren't reading your emails and scanning them for content. It's bad enough on a consumer side, but it's absolutely unacceptable as a lawyer. So again, spend the $5 or $10 a month and get a professional email account with a professional domain. It's not very expensive. You should do it. Not only does it look professional, but it is professional and it protects your data. Once you get that email account, configure it well. Configure your signature block thoroughly. Configure all the filters. Get stuff to automate itself, because what's going to happen over time, and you're not going to see it coming, it will slowly happen over a number of years, and you're going to suddenly discover that you are getting well over 200 emails a day. And I don't just mean spam, I mean 200 emails a day that you actually have to look at, or at least triage in one way or another. And if you set up your filters and rules correctly from the beginning, you can have all of those emails pre-triage themselves so that you can go into folders or labels, depending on which system you're using, and then be able to batch process. Right now I'm going to deal with all the client payments I received. Right now I'm going to deal with all of the e-courts notifications of all the upcoming cases. And that allows me to A, triage my cases, B, it allows my emails, B, it allows me to set up rules that will auto forward certain things so that somebody else that I've assigned to deal with can deal with checking the e-courts updates and cross-checking them on our calendar. If you set up all those rules, a lot of your work does itself. Instead, if you don't, you have to click on each of those emails, forward that to your paralegal, forward that to the HR person, forward that to the bookkeeper. It becomes painful. So you want to be able to get rid of as many emails in your inbox as possible through as many automated means as possible, so that you're only focusing on the ones that need your actual attention. Same applies to configuring your calendar. Keep in mind that your calendar should be integrated and synced with your practice management system. So should your contacts. And that way, everything links in together. If I get a chance at the end, I'm going to show you a demo of all these, not even a demo, but just kind of take you through how all these things connect together. Your practice management system is the heart of your firm. So that's where you're going to have all of the matters, all of the tasks assigned to you. That's where you're going to put in all your time entries. That's the thing that's going to generate the bills. And depending on the compensation structure of the firm you work at, that's going to be the system that also determines how much money you brought in, how much money, what you generated versus what you, what you originated versus what you billed. And there's all kinds of complicated compensation structures, but in the end, even if there is no complicated formula there, at the end of the year, the managing partner or partners are going to look at reports from the practice management system to evaluate productivity. So that's where everything sits. Notes, comments. A good practice management system will have a client portal for secure communications, documents, uploads, etc. It will have a tool to share securely with opposing counsel and with co-counsel so that you can do document production inside of there. And it should have integrations with a whole bunch of the other tools you use. So mine integrates with any number of things, from my process service company to my phone answering company to my phone tech company, like the one that actually provides the server cloud-based system that runs my phone numbers. That logs every call. The receptionist service, when they log in a call, that automatically goes into a communications log. The process service is done directly from within the Matter tab by selecting documents and clicking serve. All sorts of things like that integrate with each other. You're going to want to learn how pretty much all of that works. And most importantly, you're going to want to take the time to configure it all, to integrate and to synchronize. Because all of these tools are great, but if you're saving things in one, uploading them to the other, then dragging them to a third, and opening up 20 portals along the way, you're slowing yourself down on absolute nonsense. I mentioned the virtual phone service before. You should definitely get one and configure it correctly. You should do that before you even start applying for jobs. Your boss should never really have your real cell phone. Give them your Google Voice number. They can call it, they can text it, they'll never know the difference, but that becomes your professional line before anybody can start bugging you on your personal one. I assume all of you know how to use video conferencing, but again, configure it professionally, get your name, get your profile photo, get all that fun stuff in there so that it's preset and ready to go. Make sure that you are proficient with cloud storage, anything from OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, et cetera. Make sure you understand the difference between local storage and cloud storage, meaning it's great to have everything stored in the cloud, but what happens when you're stuck underground in the New York City subway systems and you want to work on your files? So what you really want is cloud storage with local copy. That way, you still have folders on your computer that mimic exactly what is on the cloud. That way, if the internet gives out, you can still work on your local copy, and when the internet comes back, everything synchronizes. Your cloud storage should integrate with your practice management system also, as I mentioned. So you should be able to see all the documents and edit all the documents right from within the practice management portal and not have to go off into your cloud storage portal or your Windows Explorer for the local copy unless you have to. You should also be comfortable with research tools, including AI-based ones. Although, to be fair, as I'm sure you've all heard on the news so far, the AI-based research tools are not particularly amazing. The AI drafting and writing tools, however, are wonderful. Unfortunately, lawyers are using them to do research, and then those chatbots go ahead and hallucinate cases, and lawyers get suspended. Do not be one of those people. It's simple enough to not take the hallucinations. How do you not take the hallucinations? Well, one, don't ask generative AI to generate case law. It will, but it won't be from the real world. Two, if you do ask it to draft an eloquent legal argument about something and it happens to produce case law in it, copy paste that case law, go into your favorite legal research tool. My favorite one is Google Scholar, mostly because it's free and it's awesome. And you copy paste that citation into it. And well, in about 2 seconds, you're going to know if that case was hallucinated. And if it wasn't hallucinated as a case, click into it and read it and see if what that case says actually matches the premise for which the generative AI cited it for. I've seen both ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot hallucinate both in terms of creating cases that didn't exist, as well as citing to cases that did exist, but citing to them for the completely wrong points. They do that regularly, so do not count on them. However, what you can do very often to double check things is when you do have a case citation that, let's say, opposing counsel cited for a premise, you can copy paste that, grab the Google Scholar full case, print it as a PDF, drop it into an AI tool and say, summarize this, and see if that case actually says what opposing counsel claims that it says. Because guess what? Opposing counsel have been known to hallucinate cases too, with or without the help of AI. Beyond that, you should know how to back up and restore everything on all your browsers, on all your devices, on just anything that happens to back up, to blow up in your face. You should be able to restore and be back in business with nothing more than at most a trip to Best Buy, Micro Center, or your favorite electronics store to be named later. So that's everything that's on screen that we should discuss right now. Now let's discuss the hardware itself for a minute. What should your hardware consist of? Well, whatever devices you're working with, when you have a choice of how much RAM it has, opt for the most possible. You may not think you need a lot of RAM if you understand what RAM is, because you're going to say to yourself, but I'm not doing gaming, I'm not doing high definition graphic editing. I don't actually use any programs that use up a lot of RAM when I open them. And you'd be right, except you're not going to be opening programs the way other people open programs. What I regularly find is that I have at any given point 7 or 8 Chrome windows open, each one having any number of tabs in. I also have 5 or 6 Word files, 12 or 15 Acrobat files, and God only knows what else, maybe a Windows Explorer window. And once you have that many windows open, and once you have that many tabs open, Chrome, Microsoft Word, Adobe Acrobat, they all become memory hogs like there's no tomorrow. Your computer will bog down. It will be painful. Get more RAM. Do not get stressed out. Let's see. When you say during a I assume you meant power outage, and your speech to text wrote triage. Michelle, if that's correct, I'm going to answer that. Okay, so yes, in a power outage, you will possibly lose the data in RAM. However, so first off, not an issue obviously for tablets, laptops, cell phones, but if we're talking about desktops, my first suggestion is have a UPS. You should always have a power backup, even if it's a cheap $20 kind that will only get you 2 minutes of protection. That's enough time to X out of everything that you have work not saved in. And the other thought is, if you're using either cloud-based systems or you are using, let's say, Microsoft Office 365, even if you're using the desktop version, it auto saves practically after every keystroke. So you're not likely to lose all that much data. Now, with some applications you are, and you should configure autosave to save regularly. If you're gonna put your computer in sleep mode, then that's going to drop everything onto the hard drive or the SSD anyway. So now it's on flash and it's safe. I don't really see you losing a lot of data because it's stored in RAM. So not really a concern. And your question of do I recommend the flash card? No, because again, once it goes onto the hard drive or solid state drive as they are now, do not get a hard disk drive, a spinny drive, because those all sorts of failures. But as long as you have an SSD, the data is saved almost instantly. You're generally never going to lose it from the SSD, and the SSD is itself a flash drive. So do I recommend having like a USB key to store a backup on? Yes. Every so often you should do a backup to a USB key. And what's more important is that USB key should not be kept plugged in. So if you're going to get a backup drive, and you're going to leave it plugged in for incremental daily backups, there's one major problem with that. The only time you're going to need a backup from your own resources, if everything's on the cloud anyway, is if you've been hacked and they've encrypted your data, and now you don't have your data and you're being told, pay us or else. So if you've been hit with ransomware and your data is encrypted, that's when you're going to turn to your USB drive and say, I need to get my data back. It's not really going to help you in the event of a power outage. Whatever small amount of data you lost, it'll be faster to recreate that data than try to incrementally restore from a backup from a minute ago. And it probably won't have saved any more frequently than the autosave in your software anyway. So I would say The USB key is only useful for ransomware. And that means that it can't be plugged into your computer. Because if it's constantly copying the data from the cloud and the local copy on your PC, you're going to have a major problem when all your data gets encrypted by the ransomware. Because the USB key is going to copy that encrypted data, override your existing data, and there goes your backup. So here's what you really need to have happening for proper protection. So you've got your data stored on the cloud where it's safe from a power outage that fries out your local drive. So you can always restore your local drive. You've got your local drive, which protects you from an internet outage, so you can continue working in the event the internet goes bye-bye. And then in the event ransomware hits, you've got your USB key, which is not plugged in, and which you do an incremental backup on anywhere from once a day to once a week to once a month, depending on how much data you want to have to manually restore and redo, versus how often you want to have to plug in the external drive, run an incremental backup, and here's the important one, unplug the incremental drive. Now, in the past, I would have recommended that that drive then be taken off premises and stored somewhere else in a fireproof case, blah, blah, blah. Why would I recommend that? Because in the past, before everybody had cloud backup, the problem was, of course, what happens if your office burns down and takes both your computer and the external drive with it? Well, now you don't have your data anymore. So the backup always had to be somewhere where it was independently safe from floods, fires, etc. Nowadays, I think that external drive can sit right next to the computer so long as it's not plugged into it. And between those three things, you've got a protection against the internet going away, your computer going away, and all the data on your computer and the internet going away. So I hope that covered your question, Michelle. If not, feel free to follow up. For the moment, as I mentioned, solid state drives only. Do not go with spinny drives. They're slow and unreliable, and they're being phased out anyway. So you're not going to see too many of them going forward. Make sure that whatever computer you're using, if it's a laptop or a desktop, is capable of at least 2 video outputs. I'm personally a fan of more than 2, but there's no such thing as too much on-screen space. Your screen desktop should be able to let you lay out the 3 or 4 source documents you're working from, or maybe 7 or 8, which are going to be in your browser tabs and in your PDFs. It should allow you to have the Word file that you're working on open. It should also allow you to have another Word file that you're maybe borrowing content from a prior motion that you did on a similar topic open. You should be able to simultaneously have your email open, maybe even your calendar. You should be able to basically spread out everything on your computer desktop the way you could spread out everything on your actual desktop. Or for example, at a law library where you have a nice big table to lay out all the law books on. Same idea. You will be much more productive if you're not spending all of your time switching from window to window and tab to tab. Get a laptop with the maximum resolution that your eyes can handle. You want the text to be barely legible to everybody else if your eyes are good enough to see it. Because A, it makes it harder for other people to spy on what you're reading, but B, it lets you fit more stuff on the screen. And A can be easily fixed with one of those clear stickers that limits the visibility from people standing behind your shoulder, which, by the way, you should have. You should have that on your phone, your tablet, your laptop, anything where you might be using it in public, because guess what? Someone can be reading your emails while standing off to the side. So, little footnote there. Now, when it comes to screens, there is no such thing as too much screen space. Now, this is a photo of my desk at one point. Those are 2 42-inch screens, each one the equivalent of 4 1080p screens. As you can see, I am able to load lots of information from lots of different sources and have it all on the screen at the same time as I work during the day. If at that I don't have an updated screenshot, but at this point there are 3 of those screens on my desk. Now, be mindful, big screens are not a solution all by themselves. Big, high-resolution screens are. Because while it's awesome to have lots of big screens, if your screens are low resolution, when you make things big, they just become blurry. Now, that doesn't help you. You don't want to be able to load one Microsoft Word window on a big screen and be able to see giant text from across the room. Well, you do if you're setting up that screen in the conference room as a display screen for PowerPoint slides. But that same screen does not work well as a desktop monitor, because once you make things really, really tiny on it, by its standards, it can't display them anymore because it's built for sitting 10 feet away and not 1.5 foot away. So get at least 4K. Nowadays, we're getting 8K and even 10K rolling out soon. So if you're not in desperate need of your large screen just yet, be mindful that by Christmas time, you're going to have a lot more choices. And well, enjoy Black Friday. I'm sure you'll be able to get some crazy deals. You should know the basics of printers. I hope you do, although nowadays everything's digital, so printers are less important than they used to be. What you should really know about printers is that we're phasing out the world of the big Xerox machine for the whole office. Basically, every person or little zoned work group should really have a high-speed laser printer and possibly a high-speed color multifunction to go with it. That way you can easily make a copy or print something in color. And independently from that, if you can afford the space and the funds, you should have a good high-speed scanner. You should know the basics of how to use a printer, including how to run things through the bypass tray so you can print things on letterhead or on blueback. For those of you who don't know what blueback is, consider yourself lucky. You'll find out one day. You should know how to load directional paper specifically, meaning, let's say, forms or a letterhead that already has the logo pre-printed on it. You should be able to switch sizes on papers, configure the basic functions on the printer, and you should be able to clear a jam or replace a toner without having to ask anybody else in the office to help you. When it comes to scanners, if you can afford the space, you should definitely have a separate scanners. Separate scanners have a huge advantage over scanning on the multifunction machines, which is that they do OCR on the fly, meaning instead of scanning the document and then opening it in Acrobat and clicking OCR, and if it's 100 pages, taking a lunch break while it slowly OCRs every page. Instead, you run those 100 pages through a Fujitsu scan, not Fujitsu anymore, they sold it to, I forget who they sold it to, but not Brother, one of the, doesn't matter. But a ScanSnap or an FI series printer by whoever owns them now will instantly scan and OCR, figure out directions. If you put all the pages in facing different ways, upside down, right side up, it'll figure it out. If the pages are all different sizes, it'll figure it out. Because it's a straight pass through, there's much less chance of a jam. If it sees a jam coming, it reverses, spins the wheels in different directions and clears the jam on its own most of the time. Same thing with multi-feeds, meaning when it grabs 2 pages at a time, it will back them out, try again. It does all this automatically, and on your screen appears a finished OCR document, and the speed at which these things work is just phenomenal compared to your other options. So if you're going to work with paper intake, you should definitely have one. I personally have one at home even because it's so awesome to be able to digitize all of the various stupid administrative personal mail that shows up. So just a thought, you should know how to use them. They're not hard to use, but take an hour and learn when you have access to one. Fax machines and e-faxes. So nowadays, most of you are probably not going to have a fax machine. You might want to consider one if you want truly secure fax sending and receiving, and if you have basically a phone line available to you. Most of those multifunctions that I mentioned, like this thing here, they're gonna have faxing built in, but you just have to plug in a phone line. Now, the catch is many of you may not even have a landline anymore, but assuming you do, if you plug in a fax machine, and if you fax something to someone who also has a fax machine on a phone line, that is one of the most secure and encrypted ways of sending information because it's not going on the internet. Instead, it's going via copper lines that go and that the only way somebody can intercept would be to actually tap the phone line. Now, that's really awesome because that lets you send really secure communications without having to worry about encryption or anything else. And very often it lets you do that with people who are not very high tech and who still may very well own a fax machine. A lot of my more elderly clients prefer to get documents by fax, and I'm happy to send them to them. Now, I can do the same thing without a fax machine with an eFax, but here's where the eFax problem comes in. If you use the eFax solely on the server side, meaning you log onto your eFax services website and you upload your PDF and you type in the phone number that it's going to and you hit send, and the other side is using a regular fax machine, or the other side is also having it land on a fax server but not going past there, then you're still pretty safe because you've got two encrypted connections logging into portals, and then you've got the fax going between two fax portals. So that's all good. Unfortunately, you might send a fax, whether that way or through the fax machine, but the other side is using an eFax with a forward to email function, where after they receive the fax server will forward that as a PDF to the client. Often it'll even do the courtesy of OCRing the PDF for them. This is all well and good and seems like a nice function, but now you've converted an encrypted secure communication into an unencrypted, OCR'd, text searchable, completely unprotected email. And the whole point of using the fax for security has just been defeated. The same thing is true, obviously, if you use the email to fax function, which a lot of those fax services have, which is where you get to type in the phone number at fax services domain, and then you essentially attach your PDF and it sends a fax to that phone number with your PDF. Very convenient, no need to log into a portal, but you just undermined all the security. So use an eFax, but please disable the forward. Instead, have it send you an email notifying you have received the fax. Click here to open it. You click, it takes you to a portal, you log in. If you have your password manager set up, it's only a couple of extra clicks, but now you've preserved attorney-client privilege, confidentiality, and personal information. So that is what you should know there. Dictation software, speech to text is getting really, really good. Phones are getting really good at it. However, they're not good enough for illegal drafting. If you try to use your phone to dictate a memo of law, and you're going to use legalese, and you're going to use Latin phrases, and you're going to put in citations because you're dictating as you're reading the cases in Google Scholar, it's not going to work. None of that's going to work. However, Dragon Legal was specifically built for that purpose. So have certain dictation microphones like the Philips speech mic. And the speech mic is designed to make it easier for the computer to understand your speech. It's a dictation microphone. So it has lots of filters that other microphones don't, because other microphones want to capture things like background noises, music, etc. The Philips one does not. So you get clarity. The Dragon Legal has a lexicon of all the legal words and legal phrases, and it understands how Blue Book works. And so you can give it a citation, even in somewhat shorthand, and have it legalize it for you. So, and by the way, yes, it has a portable app, which you can use with your phone. But again, the microphone's not going to be quite as good, but it's still going to be a lot better than the speech to text that comes with your phone, tablet, or computer. I already mentioned AI. Learn it, use it, but use it at your peril. Meaning, in the end, you as a lawyer are going to be responsible for what you sign your name to. So if you want to have the AI generate the brief, great. If you want to sign your name to it and upload it without editing it and making sure that it's accurate and correctly reflects the facts, the law, and analyzes everything in the way that is best for your client, okay, I'll be reading about you in some of the upcoming disbarment proceedings. But if you edit everything, if you make sure that the work product is good, you can improve the quality of your writing, you can improve the layout of the argument, the wording, the flow immensely by using AI. And for those of you who don't realize, you've been using AI for years. When Microsoft Word offers you a different phrasing suggestion, that's the same kind of generative AI at work, just on a much simpler level. When you're typing a text message and your phone offers you the next word, and you're able to use those next predictive words to pretty much spell out your entire thought, and you're like, wow, how did it know what I was going to say? That's generative AI. It figured out what you were going to say next, and it said it for you. So when new rules are being discussed, like lawyers need to disclose if they used AI in their work product when submitting a brief, I scratch my head and I say, well, okay, that rule's being put together by somebody who doesn't understand AI. Because if they did, well, they wouldn't be saying that, because in reality, I'd argue that every brief submitted, unless you use the typewriter these days, is going to have some level of AI in it. If you do a Google search, you're using AI. If you're using Lexis or Westlaw, there's AI. Are you getting to see it or toggle it? No, it's in the background, but it still helps determine the order in which the cases you see appear, which cases appear, and why. So be mindful of it. Play with the tools, look at their limitations. Often you can ask them what their limitations are. Be mindful to ask it what its terms of service are. I kid you not, the best way to find out from the AI whether you can give it confidential information, whether you're on a paid plan where you own the data or whether you're on a plan where they get to view the data, is ask the AI, what can you do with the confidential data I provide? Can you provide me with a guarantee that this data does not get sold to third parties? You know, ask it those questions. It will tell you. I kid you not, it's that simple. But most lawyers don't even think to. So beyond that, should you care about industry-specific software? Yes. But that may be premature for those of you who haven't figured out what industries you're going to be working with. Anybody who's going to be working in anything commercial, business, finance, should really have a basic grasp of bookkeeping and accounting. I'd say make sure you take a bookkeeping accounting 101 type course. Learn the basics of QuickBooks. If you have access to QuickBooks or you want to get a free trial, use that, learn it, not use it as in, you know, learn all the features. I mean, figure out the basics of how the screens look, what reports are available, and what those reports look like. Because you have no idea how much better your discovery demands can be when you know exactly what to demand to get that smoking gun out of the QuickBooks system. And most companies use QuickBooks or a similar system, and those systems specifically log every action. So you can ask for a log from date of controversy forward to establish if anything's been edited. And that sort of thing, really important. And if you're going to run your own firm, you really need to understand bookkeeping and accounting because, well, how are you going to know if you're making money? How are you going to figure out where your biggest losses are, what your biggest expenses are, etc.? You're not going to run a firm on Excel. It will kill you. Now, with other fields, same thing. If you're going to work in real estate construction, you should probably understand the basics of CAD/CAM. That's computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing. If you're going to work with startups and do startup formations and bylaws and Series A financing, fundings and so on, you're probably going to want to learn things like CARTA. So there's lots of products. Those are going to vary field to field. Integrations, same idea. And here's basically where this is going to be my last slide. I had a few others in here, but this is the one I'm going to take a minute on and run an example through for you. So if you integrate everything correctly, my practice management system runs my firm. It integrates with ClioPay, its own system, obviously, and LawPay, another system, between the two of which clients can pay all my invoices electronically, and they can deposit funds into escrow electronically. All of that auto logs in Clio and auto exports into QuickBooks. We'll get to QuickBooks later. Incoming phone calls get routed by my phone system, Virtual PBX, to a company called Smith.ai, which has receptionists answering phones on my behalf 24 hours a day. They know the basics about my firm, can schedule appointments, can connect the caller to the appropriate attorney or support staff here, can take a message. can basically do all the things receptionists do, but I have an unlimited number of them. They're 24/7, 365, and I don't have to, have any of them on salary, and they can take 12 calls at a time. And I don't have to worry about lunch breaks or anything. So that gets logged into Clio, synchronizes, and the people who call in, the receptionists at Smith.ai collect their name, phone number, and email, and automatically make them into a contact, which synchronizes with Clio, which synchronizes with Google Workspace, which then means that if I want to send them an email or I want to call them, their contacts are already in there, and I'm not hunting for them. So meanwhile, all the files and documents that come into the firm go into OneDrive, which again is synced with Clio, so you can drop it in via Clio or via OneDrive, doesn't make a difference. Again, via web portal or local copy, which will synchronize itself, doesn't make a difference. All goes into the same place, accessible to all staff. Emails, SMS, direct calls, all go through Google, which again syncs with Clio. Address labels when we need to do a mailing are made by Dymo, which syncs everything from Google again, which gets them from Clio, which gets them from Smith.ai. So everything automatically cross-synchronizes, address labels print, stamps print, everything comes out of a Dymo printer. It's awesome. I already mentioned virtual PBX. Process service is done by an integration into Clio called Proof, which is a company called ProofServe. They have a web portal, so if you don't use Clio, doesn't matter. You upload a PDF to their portal, type in who you want to serve and where they're located, how fast you want the service to be. Service is done online. You should be aware of services like that. And if you have that service integrate into your practice management system, it's as simple as selecting the documents you want served, selecting the contacts you want served, drop down for how fast, click serve, Proof serves, charges the credit card on file, enters an expense entry into Clio so that the client gets billed for it, and uploads the affidavit of service right into practice management system again, from which I can then e-file it to those NICEF or Pacer that I mentioned earlier through another integration. So that's all the integrations. I know we're pretty much out of time. You should also be aware of plugins into your browsers, extensions, various things that allow you to do more stuff from the same screen without having to open other tools. So once you figure out what tools you use, figure out what extensions they have. You should look into various document assembly products. They are very practice area specific. Here's a screenshot with some of them. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to hit print screen and save the screenshot in case you want it, unless these slides are available to you later. And on that, we end. We do not have time for questions at the end, but I don't see any open ones, so that's great. If you do have questions later, don't hesitate to email me. And yeah, that's
Perfect. Thanks so
basically it.
much, Alex.
No trouble at all.
Alrighty, so this will conclude our program. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Alex at any point in time. He has given his contact information. I will go ahead and end this webinar. Thank you.
Pleasure being here. Take care. Bye all.